If you have a history of trauma, I know you know how much it can come back and trigger thoughts and behaviors and limits that hurt your work life, that drag down your hopes of advancement in your career. Hardly anybody talks about this, and I don't know why. It's such an important part of life. Of course, the symptoms of childhood PTSD can hold you back at work. And I'm going to walk through some ways it does that and how you can turn it around. Not just so that you have a fair chance at success and professional fulfillment in your life, and of course, financial security, hello, but because doing work that's meaningful to you, feeling some sense of accomplishment, some personal growth through your work, it's part of how to build a happy life. Now, at any level, work can be stabilizing. It can be a path to overcome the chaos of your childhood. It can be a way to overcome poverty. It's certainly been that for me. And work connects you to the world. And I know some jobs are horrible. I've had some of those too. I know what it's like to have to do work you hate just because you need the money to survive. But work gets us up in the morning. It draws us out into the world, into interactions with other people. It can be a second chance to learn how life works. And it can be a place where you come into your own, where you blossom. Now, even if you don't have that now, even if work is so triggering for you, you're just locking yourself in, there is a path out. And I encourage you to set your sight on that path. Working is a large part of life, and even when work is menial, our engagement with it can be healing and uplifting. It can be a way to bring more good into the world, and that's really important too. So how do you do that? How can a person with a history of trauma rise up like that to become a person who finds joy on the job, who becomes an agent of goodness and of usefulness, who brings peace and comfort and order to environments that would otherwise be, hard-hearted or chaotic? Work is a way you can encourage other people, and they need that. Work is one place where parts of who you really are can show up. And of course, work is a way, to get money. Let's talk about money. Money is how you have choices. Anyone who's ever been stuck and broke without work does not romanticize money. Of money, it's just evil. It's like, no, money is choice. Money is survival, and then money brings choices. Without money, you can be stuck in a terrible situation. You could be trapped in a bad relationship. So it's so important to learn how you can generate money through work so that always, no matter what's going on in your life, you're fulfilled and you have choices. All right. So what are some of the childhood PTSD symptoms that can show up at work and hold you back? Number one, you end up working for people in organizations that untraumatized people would know not to work for. They're people who are abusive, dishonest, exploitative. It's not safe. And there is this tendency in people who grew up having to to fit themselves to unacceptable situations at home, to be just too good at it. It's time to stop. Stop fitting yourself to bad things. Begin to get clear about what your standards are, about what is an appropriate, good, decent, workable situation where you can do your job. What kind of people do you need to work for? Get clear about this. This is one of my symptoms of CPTSD, is feeling like I just get sort of like buffeted around and end up in jobs like the only job that came along in the little that I was able to look for a job because I was really depressed, or, the first place that hired me. In my life, I've paid the price for not exercising choice. And I've ended up in situations where I was really unhappy, and I spent all my energy kind of pushing back against the thing I didn't like about the job, rather than going, I don't like this job, I'll go somewhere else. And luckily, ever since I've been in the process of healing my trauma, which is basically like 29 years now, I've been coming up and up and up. So things that fit me when I was younger, less experienced, but also still really underneath the weight of my trauma symptoms, well, I'm in a different league now, and I've been in progressively better leagues all along, where I could learn to, I could do good customer service now that I don't have loss of control of my emotional state, just because I'm triggered. I have a way to, compartmentalize that, put it aside, deliver the good customer service, and then go off and use my tools to deal with the dysregulation that happens. So you can really change your station in life by learning to work with your own symptoms. But for gosh sakes, do not get into work situations that are only going to make it worse. And don't kid yourself that just staying in a bad situation at work, that just staying there, well, okay, I know the thing that you should have, you should keep your job until you've got another one lined up. I know that. But you have to weigh that against what happens to your spirit and your psyche when you sit there and take abuse. And what happens, and this is true in romantic relationships and just bad situations in general, you get eroded when you tolerate bad situations like that, bad treatment. It wears you down until, you'd be at a job interview and you'd be like, hi, I know I'm not worth very much, but I thought I'd try. You can't bring that energy and spirit that you need for the job interview. So staying in the job isn't everything. And I know money is always a consideration, but please take care of your spirit so that abuse doesn't wear you down to the point that you can't even try to take your step onward and out. Number 2, you end up working for someone who is funnily very similar to your abusive parent. And you fall into the same role that you once played in response to that person, whether that's people-pleasing, overworking, rebelling against them, getting resentful or immobilized or suffering because you're not seen. That was my thing. I wasn't really seen by my mom, and I just kept getting bosses who would just completely overlook me. And no, they were not reading my mind or looking out for my best interest. And I later learned what you have to do. You have to ask for the raise. You have to state what you feel that you would like to be doing and how much you should be paid for it. And then if they won't do it, you go somewhere else. I didn't do that for a long time because I was very insecure about whether I deserved more. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Sometimes, though, not working for the type of person can help you not play your old role. So, CPTSD symptoms are sticky like that. So that role, the role where I become like the long-suffering, overlooked Cinderella that I had in my family of origin, they all get to go to the ball. I have to stay home and scrub the chimney or whatever. It's a little bit of a metaphor for what it was like for me, but I kept playing that role in jobs. Literally, everybody went off to a conference once, a conference that I was really probably the person who most should have been at it. And when they came back, they said, here, transcribe the recording. I remember that. There was a moment of clarity. I'm like, I'm out of here. This is wrong. But I had enough healing. I think that was maybe 3-4 years into my healing when I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right. I actually am really good. It's a long story, but I wrote a book on the topic of the conference and nobody else had. And yeah, it was actually a bad dynamic with the boss. The boss had some sort of I don't know. I don't even know what. I don't even need to know. I think it was competition or sexism. Who knows? I just know I needed to not work there anymore, and now I don't. So yay. Okay, this is number 3. The person you work for is actually fine, but you parentify them anyway, waiting for them to realize how good you are. And feeling jealous of the favor that they show to other people, waiting for them to give you better duties and a raise. You don't ever advocate for yourself, and you end up resentful and not giving your best. So this is another version of the abusive parent, but how about, the boss is fine, but the old parent dynamic, you're coming up and projecting your half of it. There's no way I'm going to be treated fairly. There's no way my needs are going to be met. They're against me. I can't. So when that's operating, that can really hold you back too. Nobody has any idea that that's going on in your head, but they're soon going to notice the outward manifestations, the way that you kind of resist and hunch up against growth and opportunities or questions or difficulty. And so, I always want to remind people, it makes sense sometimes to contain your feelings and to behave and to be appropriate even when your thoughts are inappropriate. You know that you can't get away with expressing them. But the thing is, we all have a nervous system. So in a way, you can't really hide what's going on. People can feel it. And just for example, when somebody's really angry and then you go, is something wrong? You seem angry. And they go, no, I'm not angry. You know they are. If your nervous system works, you can feel it. I've heard theories that our nervous systems are like one giant organism, really, and in a way that makes sense to me. That's how we have collective conscience, perhaps. That's how sometimes we have intuition about others. We actually have some form of connection that may or may not be, if it's physical, it's on some atomic level. I don't know what it is, but I just know I can't hide how I really feel. And so the healing has to happen for me to be perceived as not angry, as not terrified. I have to honestly be who I present myself to be. That said, I totally believe that sometimes you fake it till you make it. Sometimes you act as if. Sometimes you pretend you're brave and you start your first day of a new job, even though it is frightening and there's a lot of doubts and all that. So sometimes we do that. But just remember, people can sense it. Here's the thing. This is about parentifying your boss. Do not parentify your boss. They're not your parent. The other thing about parentifying your boss is it's a disordered dynamic right there. Because this is actually a contractual agreement. Now, a lot of times it becomes like family on a job, but it's a little different than a family in that they can fire you and that's it. That's all. They can fire you, or there's so many things that can happen there that are not like a family. But a lot of times, because we have fuzzy boundaries, because our emotional needs weren't met in our families, then that sort of need for a family kind of goes in and weaves its tendrils into the whole job situation. And what happens is, if you're not treated fairly, if you're not invited to stay on another year, it can be devastating, as if you've been cast out of your family, which could have already happened in your actual family, right? So it's devastating for a person with those wounds from a family. So the way to head it off is to learn to have kinds of relationships and to be very clear with yourself through doing your homework, using your tools, having the support of a mentor. I really encourage you to do that. Tools and mentor, very potent combination. I can talk about that later in this video. But you want to do that so that you approach the job with actually a realistic dynamic, that you bring half of that dynamic in of like, this is a contractual arrangement. I have made an agreement with you that you will pay me if I do this job. And if I do this job well, that's one thing. And if I do this job badly, that's another thing. And if I would like to advance in this career, if I would like to get a raise, I really want to do the job well. I want to have a good relationship, but not one where I'm emotionally melting down, acting on, like opening the portals of hell to those old childhood wounds and behaving as a rejected child. I was a rejected child. And I have brought that energy to work, and it doesn't make sense at work. And it's a very difficult position to put somebody in. And it's not something that tends to get you a raise or advancement. So, I can predict the comments from people who are feeling hurt by this and just feel like, but it's not fair. And I'm just going to say, yes, it is fair. A job is a contractual agreement. And if you've been at a job a long time, there are family-like bonds there of loyalty. But in the end, a business has to look out for itself, and sometimes at the expense of its people. That's how it works. And it's hard, but it's how it is. And how it is a very good thing to be able to see, recognize, and work with. So other bonds are more permanent. Other bonds have other obligations, to stick with you through thick and thin, to love you even if you can't do your job. That's a different bond. So there's so much, my career was so liberated and set free. Like, I was very stuck. I've often told people here, I couldn't get a job at McDonald's when I was 16. And I often got jobs because of my smarts, but a lot of because of the emotional energy I brought to jobs, and that made me difficult, unreliable, kind of a handful at work. I didn't get along with some people a little too much of the time. I did not advance. They couldn't put me in charge of things. And so I often had this beautiful luxury of being able to create a job for myself, but it never involved moving up. And there was a real ceiling on how much money I could make. And that was not acceptable, because for 9 years I was a single mom. I had to have enough money to get by. I had to do it. And so I did something different that when I learned this lesson, and I left that job. I went and got this other job. And this was I was very surprised. I got a 50% raise when I got a different job from the job that I had been, very miserable and feeling stuck. Then later I went back to the old job and got another raise that was effectively double what I had made there in the past. And it was actually appropriate for my level and my education and for what I was contributing. the place that I was working, if you were to ask me now, I wish I hadn't gone back there. Yes, I got money, but I was still working for the same people who didn't think I was worth it, who complained, who didn't give me opportunities. And there were so many ways that job was like having a terrible boyfriend. I used to say that it's kind of like having a boyfriend who won't commit, and you've had children already and they still won't commit and they won't help out, and they won't, that's what it's like, well, that's interesting, because that's what was going on in my real private life. That's what was going on. And that's what happens. Unhealed trauma leads us into trauma-driven behaviors that are just going to keep playing out as that thing that is unhealed. So I had not healed that part of me that it's hard to define. Like, why would I do that? Why would I get into a relationship and have kids with a guy who wouldn't commit to me? Why would I do that? It was a lot like the dynamics in my home. I didn't have that kind of like diehard commitment from my mom, and my dad, my birth dad, who did feel that way about me, died when I was a teenager. And so I don't know, I just kept crap fitting myself. That was one area that I could crap fit really well, and so I did. And I was very driven by a fear, like, I'm never going to have anything. I should just take what I can get, job-wise, partner-wise. I should just take what I can get. And it all worked out. I'm very happy now, and my life is full, and I have kids, and they're adult kids now. And so healing, it's funny how our healed life can work with us wherever we come from. It can work with whatever wounds there are, and life can unfold and be wonderful anyway. So don't worry. Don't worry if you've got problems right now. Don't worry if you're stuck in old patterns. But listen to me, because I'm telling you a list of things at work that can really hold you down. And you can start changing those even if you don't have everything worked out in your life. All right, you ready for another one? Okay, this is kind of an extension of the last one. And this is where, you've sort of slipped into a family dynamic at your job, and all of your energy is about trying to make them get it about you, what you can do with that energy is to take it and improve your skills and your knowledge and your options. And I can't stress this enough. Like, evidently, this is what normal parents teach their kids. So I'm teaching you now, having gone through this cycle and moved through and had these opportunities finally open up to me. But it came from, I went and got a master's degree. And I actually didn't use that master's degree. It was very fancy, and I thought it was what I wanted. But when I worked there, that was the job I really didn't like, and I wasn't really using it. And one thing led to another, and I've ended up creating 3 different businesses for myself. And I recommend this. If you have CPTSD and family dynamics have a way of leaking into your workplace, I just found having my own business and having clients that I served was a lot more clean and straightforward, and not like a parent, not like a family. I sign an agreement with somebody. I work for them for a couple of months. I used to do customer service training as a consultant. Then I had a video production company, and now I do Crappy Childhood Fairy, and you're my client. And so when I work directly with people like that and not through an employer doing something, it just really works for me, and it's motivating to me. And if it ever goes south, which sometimes it does, I've had some very icky clients before, well, then you just don't work with them again. It's so cool. So you have a lot more mobility to keep making, if you're a person who's changing dramatically because you're healing your past trauma, doing consulting and changing clients often is a way that you can kind of keep upping your game and not waiting for somebody else to decide if they're going to give you, a promotion. That's never worked for me. That's never worked for me. In my younger days, I was a comedian in Hollywood. And before that, I had been trying to make it in acting, right? And I never did. I feel like I could really act now, but but when I was doing that, I had to wait for somebody to think I was the right person. And they'd be like, you have kind of a character face and da-da-da, and you should get your nose fixed. Everything that I would ever have would be decided by somebody else. And I was like, what happens with comedians? They write their own ticket. They write the role for themselves, and anybody can get up on stage and do comedy. So these are just some examples of twists and turns in my career where I kept discovering where I could bring all my potential to bear. I think that my upbringing, my trauma symptoms had really diminished and marked me as somebody not quite suitable for things that I actually was capable of. I had a lot of growth to do. And I have set myself free. And honestly, Crappy Childhood Fairy, everything I told you of the work that I've done before, It all came together into this job, so you never know. If you keep working on yourself and your skills. By the way, that video production company, I had to teach myself to edit on Google. I Googled, how do you edit video? That's how I did it. And then I started charging money for it. And I got people to pay me. And eventually I hired a staff. But I still, to this day, I do know how to edit video. I taught myself how to do it. So when people say, oh, I don't have an education, I'm like, okay, education is a thing. It's valuable. It's real. But if you need money right now, there are things you can teach yourself on this thing that we're on right now, which is the most powerful source of learning there has ever been in human history. There's quirks that I could complain about YouTube, but it's all here. Like everything that you want to know how to do, it's here. And if you're motivated, you can teach yourself. So don't waste energy on some crappy boss who doesn't get you. Put your energy into learning things that you can either finally get recognized there or go somewhere where you are recognized. Like work is a joy. Work can be a wonderful way forward. I gave you a big speech about it at the beginning of this video about like, money is important, and it doesn't stop there. What's important is that connection to the world, that feeling of usefulness, the feeling of having somewhere you need to be every day because people are counting on you. These are the ingredients of happiness. I'm still talking about things that can hold you back and then what to do. So here's another one that can hold you back. And this may not apply to you, but it sure applies to a lot of people who had trauma. You're in a line of work that's like loaded with traumatized people. All right. So I used to work in a nonprofit that was about a political thing that was very divisive. Very life and death, very intense. And one day I realized that about 80% of the people who worked there were adult children of alcoholics like me. And when adult children of alcoholics haven't healed, that's a really common symptom, is being very excited by drama, conflict, drama, playing the good guy and getting in there. And, I'm glad there are good guys out there doing this stuff, but it was a really sick environment for me. And when I healed, I had to get out of that office because being around all that like trauma drama energy and just like, oh my God, you're not going to believe what Congress did today. I was just like, oh, bleh, I want to get out. And then I used to like the show ER, and I just like didn't anymore. I'm totally into shows that are high drama now. But when I was in my early recovery, I couldn't watch TV. It was all about adrenaline. And it was just so funny because they were acting out these like terrible scenarios where you're just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then I was about a year into recovery where I realized this was stressing me out. It was draining me. And what I was really seeking through my recovery was to have less drama, more calm, more just like connection to things, more awareness. So trauma and fear as entertainment has its place, right? It's like horror movies and roller coasters. I've loved all of those things in due time. And I used to think, how when rock and rollers get old and they're like 80 and they do songs about like, I like to sit on the porch. It's a nice sunset. And I used to think, oh God, I never want to be like that. Well, now I'm like that. Now I'm like that. I like songs that bring me peace and sort of help me appreciate life. So we are where we are. Okay. What I'm saying about the professions, though, trauma-driven professions, emergency services person, you're out there in the ambulance dealing with wrecks. A lot of people who are nurses, especially nurses in like a trauma unit or an ER, I don't need to tell you, very, very highly populated with people who grew up with trauma. And the fact is, most people find those jobs inhibiting to their ability to start changing their level of dysregulation. So that's a dilemma, right? You were drawn to it initially, and now it's starting to be an obstacle. But if you change careers midway, you'd be like me and a lot of other people. It's okay to change careers, and a lot of times what you've done before is so helpful for educating people about some reality that you've worked in, personally about stuff. Like I did. I worked in public health for 30 years. I know a lot about that. I know how to talk to people who work in public health. I know the sensibility. I know the way funding works there and how that can drive the agenda. I know how to work outside of that while being respectful to it. So this is a skill too, is being somewhere and leaving it. And you can do that. All right, here's a characteristic that can get in the way of your career success. This one's kind of general. Trauma response, okay? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fight, that's where you get very argumentative and high conflict. Flight, you escape, you run away, you drink, whatever. Fight, flight, freeze. Freeze is you just take crap, you don't do anything about it. And fawn is you're like, oh, let me try to make you feel better. I'm sorry you're mad at me. Let me fix it. Okay, so those are 4 trauma responses. There may be others, right? Fix, other things that start with F. That's a trauma response, right? I won't go there. But your trauma responses are too strong. So when work is stressful, which it can be, your trauma responses come off and it's just too strong. You're too argumentative. You're too escapist. You don't show up for work. You call in sick when the going gets tough. You freeze. You take all this abuse and you don't change jobs, or you fawn. You keep trying to make them like you and see you and get you. See how I'm talking about trauma responses through all of this? So that's kind of a general one. I probably should have said this in the introduction, but that's a thing that can get in your way. So trauma responses, they're natural. You want to we all have all of them at times, and we tend to favor 1 or 2 of them. And you want to come back to center on that. So that instead of having a trauma response, when you feel hurt and upset by something, your trauma response happens, you have a way to separate, process that, heal it, calm it down, and then show up again at work, not delivering them your trauma response, but your solution, whether that's to leave, defend yourself, advocate for yourself, quiet quit. Yeah, quiet quitting sounds terrible to me. What a waste of life that is. If you're going to work, make the most of it. That's my philosophy. Okay. Number 7 is you haven't learned to manage your trauma symptoms. So to hide them, you're keeping your life small. All right. So I talk a lot about like playing small, right? So your trauma symptoms, before you have any recovery, they mess up everything. They ruin your opportunities. They make you look foolish, sad, crazy. They thwart you from getting what you want. So one way you can control your trauma symptoms is by keeping your life small. Don't go for jobs that are challenging. Don't be around people. Be alone. Do something really unchallenging in isolation. That's what we do, right? I'm not really exaggerating. That's what we do. Or just doing jobs that are so easy or so repetitive that you can just do that. Now, I think an easy, repetitive job can be very therapeutic when you're in a certain place, but it's not suitable for your whole life. It's not suitable. And just like isolating, sometimes you need some time alone, but isolating for your whole life is not a great idea. And yes, I hear the chorus of people who say, no, it's great, isolating's great, I really don't want to do it. But you're so busted because you watch my videos, so I know you're working on yourself. And I'm teaching you about relational stuff. So even if you're a person who loves solitude, learning this relational stuff is powerful and good stuff, and hang in there. There are aspects of life, and if you don't believe me now, when you're old and you need some help to take care of yourself, or you're sick, you will see what I'm saying about how important it is to have people in your life. It's important. This is a big one. We could talk on and on and on about this. Number 8 is emotional dysregulation. All right? This is probably the number 1 thing that gets in the way of your advancement, because emotional dysregulation wrings you out. It can leave you with something very similar in your body to a hangover because you were crying all night or you were having a big argument the night before. And when you have drama in your private life, it can leak into your work life. So even if you keep it all together at work, like I think I was pretty good at that. I think I would lash out sometimes, but the drama I was having in my private life was showing up in my face and in the time I arrived at work and my bedraggled persona. Like I said, our nervous systems are connected. And so people could tell I was in great distress. And they were kind and supportive of me, but they did not promote me. So I really did work with mostly very kind people. But I couldn't get ahead and use my talents because I just could not keep out of the terrible problems that I was having on my own time. So emotional re-regulation, this is going to be your friend no matter what part of your life you're working on right now. Your work, your relationships, your parenting, your neighbors, all of it will require emotional re-regulation. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But what you really need, because all that dysregulation, it takes your productivity and you have these bursts of productivity and then it goes down. It's like a roller coaster, right? Productivity like a roller coaster. So sometimes you can get away with that, and there's some types of work where bursts is sufficient, that you can come in and just deliver like crazy. Some people are very, very good at creating order out of a bunch of papers or processes, and that's a gift too. So there are many gifts And you can never really be 100% certain that you have exactly this one, but your job is to start noticing where is that feedback that what you do benefits others. You get to do a lot of things just for yourself. You have a lot of talents and skills, but the gift is the thing that connects you to your greater purpose to be of service to this world in the best possible way. And you'll be clumsy with it, and you won't have it right initially. Like, you'll be on a path all your life to go towards what it is. Some people are very lucky and they find it early. It took me a long time. I'm living it right now in what I'm doing right now. And it just is so much happier. There's so much more abundant energy every day to do it, because it just feels like what I'm made to do. And everybody deserves to have that. Healing trauma is essential for you to discover that in yourself. So whatever you do for a living, and when I was first learning this, I saw a parking lot attendant. They weren't even the attendant. They were the guy who sweeps the parking lot and just gets the fallen leaves out of it. And they were so kind and uplifting. And it was at a hospital. I had a long period where I was in and out of the hospital. And I would enjoy so much seeing this parking lot guy, because he was kind and friendly to me, and he would sort of help me change I think he might have been a healer, actually. I'd be going into the hospital for some dreadful thing. I'm fine now, but I'd be going in and he'd be like, "Hey, how's it going?" And there was this funny way he sort of changed my whole attitude to, like, I'm so grateful that I have healthcare to deal with this problem. My whole attitude would change. He wouldn't lecture me. He didn't say it. He just emanated it. And through working in a parking lot, which I'm sure was not the best paid job, he exhibited joy and optimism that was transmissible. And I received that. I met a lot of really gifted people when I was in and out of the hospital. But if you've ever been in the hospital, they don't all have that. It can be rough. Sometimes some people are just like mean. They're mean and they don't care. I don't know. It's a mixed bag out there, but my growth in healing is where I stopped focusing so much on how somebody was mean once to me in the hospital, or, well, more than once, okay, and more on, I admire these people so much. I want to be like that. I want to develop the things in myself where I'm that person for somebody else. And they start to have that experience of having their attitude lifted because of some incidental contact with me, even when I don't know I'm doing it. Like, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be wonderful? In workplaces everywhere, people with complex PTSD are making tremendous contributions with their talents and hard work, and at the same time struggling with symptoms and living in fear that sooner or later they're going to get found out and passed over or penalized or fired. Has this happened to you? There are some patterns that are common to people who went through abuse and neglect as kids, and they can hold you back from getting hired in jobs that fit, or from even seeking those jobs. And they can stop you from rising up to the level where you belong, doing what you really are capable of. Now, the bad news is that these patterns can get stuck. They can be hard to change. But the good news is that we do change them. And with some knowledge and support and perseverance, you can heal those tendencies and start using all your experiences, including some of the harsh ones, to become all that you were meant to be. And I can help you do that. I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I teach people to recognize and heal the symptoms that so often show up in adults who have PTSD from childhood. And today I want to read a letter from a student of mine named Sue. And she says, "Hi, Anna. I suffer from CPTSD and nobody at work knows. I spend an inordinate amount of time hiding the fact that my energy and flow is extremely inconsistent. I work at home and I manage to get my work done through self-flagellation more than anything else. That means being hard on herself. I feel as if my life is a lie because of the energy I put into hiding how I really am. I feel a strong urge to somehow come out as someone who finds it really difficult to finish tasks and do simple tasks. More sophisticated and large tasks are actually much easier for me. I think I could bear the humiliation of that, but I can't risk losing my job because I have 3 teenagers and 1 extra for the last year to raise as a single mother. I'm on a decent salary and I wouldn't be able to find anything else on that salary, I don't think. I feel stuck in this situation, every day a stressful repeat of the day before, forcing myself to do simple tasks in a way that nobody else notices, but quietly wishing that people would notice so I can confess even if I lose everything as a consequence Is there a way out? Thank you, Sue. Sue, yes, there's a way out, and I'm here to help. I'm actually in awe of you for supporting you, your 3 kids, and another kid while you're working as a single mom. And I hear you that your work is really a struggle right now. But before I start talking about some strategies to deal with work, I want to just say with all my heart that you are doing life's most important job, raising your kids. And if you were doing that under ideal circumstances, you'd have 2 adults helping with that, doing that job. You're doing both jobs. So just big hugs and support to you and validation. You made it this far. You're doing great. And I know because I spent many years in the same boat. But in my case, I just had 2 kids and their dad had them half the time. So it was much easier. And it was still very hard. It's isolating and exhausting and thankless being a single parent. But this too shall pass. And I want to share some tips with you to stay strong and stay sane while you're still in this hard part of it. Okay? So first of all, I hear this urge in you to self-sabotage, to come out, as you say, as somebody who can't do your job, where you actually crave to get found out that you're struggling, even if it means you lose your job, even if it means you can't support your family. Now, I'm so glad you haven't done that and that you did something really positive. Instead, you confessed to me. I'm safe. You told me how crazy the process is inside, where somehow you're getting the job done despite CPTSD symptoms. Now, when you talk to someone who understands, it can really help to get some perspective. So my question for you is, are your struggles with the small things on the job really as bad as you think? I'm guessing that what you mean is that you're disorganized, maybe dropping the ball on things and feeling ashamed about it. You're dysregulated. That's a brain thing that happens to people who had childhood trauma. It's hard to keep track of details, hard to hold memories in place. It feels like, every time you try to remember something, it's like looking in your purse when you've just been stuffing things in there. It's not all neatly organized. It's okay. It can be reorganized, all right? I think it's interesting that the big picture things are easier for you. This is really valuable information, actually. I can hear that you're tired and stressed, and the conditions of your life are triggering a lot of dysregulation and fear. So it kind of makes sense that the small and detailed tasks are harder for your brain to manage. And it's absolutely kick-ass that the big tasks are easier for you. You get those done. Now, I'm going to suggest that you totally rotate this shame attack you're doing to yourself and just look at things for what they are. Small and simple tasks are not your strong point right now. Large and complex tasks are your strong point. So I just want to point out that often when someone has that combination, they are ideally teamed up with a detail person. Many, many great things have been accomplished in this world by teams that include big picture people and close-up picture people. They're both really essential. The two really need each other. They're invaluable to the job, and they work in complement with each other. Now, in small companies or startups, people often have to play both roles. And I think it's interesting that at home, you're doing the job of 2 parents, and at work, you're doing the job of 2 minds. So no wonder you're feeling the heat, girl. That's 4 jobs. It never stops, right? You've got this, though. You don't have to be perfect at all 4 jobs. I know that being a single parent means always feeling like you didn't do enough on one front or the other. Bad job, bad parent, bad job, bad parent, back and forth. That's what we do, all right? That's part of the deal. It's normal to feel that way. Now, the way you're doing both of those roles in your job right now at work, the big picture thinking, the little picture thinking, and I know there's other people you're working with who are handling both of those in one job. Well, that's awesome. But let's not envy them. Let's work toward you being that way too, or just kind of sliding along the continuum in that general direction of having less effort for you to handle both aspects of your job, or who knows, maybe one day getting to specialize in the big side and having somebody else fill in on the small side. That's an entirely possible scenario. Now, I can definitely hear in your letter that you aren't comfortable feeling like you're not doing the job that you're paid to do, and I want you to build some confidence back in the work that you're doing. Not fake, not give yourself a medal for whatever little thing you do, confidence, but earned confidence, which comes when you get right with your own integrity and you feel pride in the work you're doing. And when you feel like even if you do your job in a way that's tailored to your own neurology, you can go to bed each night knowing you did an honest day's work. That's a very good feeling. And We all miss the mark sometime, but it's worth making that your aim, to put in an honest day's work and have that satisfaction. Okay, that's your pep talk, and I want you to keep this video handy so that every time your stress and trauma are making you fantasize about catastrophic failure so that you can stop dreading the future and just get the damage over with, this positive perspective can help you stay solid and well organized and in present time, back on track. If you ever want to leave your job, that's a choice, but let's help you get back in your strong place where what you do next is always a constructive choice, or nearly always, as best as you can, a constructive choice. Choice is very powerful. Choice comes from healing your trauma, all right? Strategy. Let's talk strategy. The first one is, I'm going to suggest that you totally embrace that your energy and workflow, as you say, are extremely inconsistent. Okay, you are not alone in this work style. Lots of people who don't have CPTSD are this way. And those of us who do have CPTSD, a lot of us are this way. Did you see my video a few weeks ago? It was about crashing. You know, do you crash and lose productivity over it? It means working in big, bold bursts and then drawing back into your cave for a rest. And if CPTSD is in the driver's seat, self-flagellation, like you said. But you don't have to attack yourself for having this work style. It's a style. It's how you roll, all right? And a lot of workplaces are getting a lot more flexible about working. You know, they want your productivity. They will support you in doing it in the time and schedule that works. And I know that some jobs, like, you know, you have to be there for other people at certain hours. Okay, fair enough. But I will say, now that I'm self-employed, that's how I get to work, and it works really well for me. I have a little plugin that lets me write an email in the middle of the night and then schedule it to send at 7 in the morning, when actually I'm sitting there groggy and doing my writing and meditating and kind of getting my brain ready for the day. That's how I actually operate. But I like my emails to go out then, and by the time I come out of meditation, I'm getting responses from people. I'm like ready to roll. All right? It's normal for us and for a lot of people. Now, maybe this is causing problems for your employer, and if so, that could be a reason to talk to your employer and see about workarounds. Yes, that would be an opportunity to talk about having CPTSD, but honestly, so many of us have never actually been diagnosed. And even if we were, you have to kind of ask yourself, because CPTSD is not widely recognized, it's not always widely supported, would it lead to creating better circumstances on the job, or could it possibly lead to being stigmatized or thought of as unreliable? And so, you know, I leave that to your judgment for how to handle that. What you may be seeking is flexibility, support, accommodation. Maybe you need a quiet space, things like that. You can ask for that without outing yourself as having some sort of a, you know, disorder. In general, I favor doing all you can to support yourself and find workarounds before you decide to ask for accommodations that may or may not be available to you. Then ask if you need to. All right, let's talk about the ability to focus. If you're like basically everyone on earth in this generation, focus is a challenge. Okay, here are some tools I use to support myself on that. One is noise canceling headphones. I'm serious, these are amazing. These are kind of expensive ones. You don't have to get them this fancy, but I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And I can also play instrumental music. I can't listen to music with lyrics and get anything done. It totally hijacks my brain. I'm a very wordy person. But I can listen to white noise. I can listen to the sound of the wind in trees. I can listen to binaural beats. And some of these things can be quite calming. You can experiment with that. Number 2, you can turn off notifications on this thing and on your computer. Turn off all notifications when you're doing focused work. And that goes very nicely with the third thing, which is using a timer and working in chunks of time. I like 25-minute chunks of time. Some people use 50-minute chunks of time. I take a 5-minute break. Some people take 10 minutes. So 25 minutes working, 5-minute break. 25 minutes working, 5-minute break. And I use a little Scrum application called Kanban Flow, Kanban Flow, Flow. I love it. There's a lot of applications like it, but I can make columns of tasks. I can color code them for how much time they take. I can put names. I can slide them around to different columns. And when I want to time my work, I can go in and click a task, highlight it, a timer begins and it starts going for 25 minutes. All my notifications go off, headphones on, and I just do that. Then the timer goes off, I take a break, go get a cup of tea, check my email, whatever I want to do, and then come back and do another one. So this technique is called the Pomodoro technique, by the way. You might have heard of it out there. Pomodoro, Pomodoro. And the person who invented it, I think they had a little timer that looked like a tomato. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, okay? I love this technique. When I have writer's block, which is constantly, I write a lot of stuff, and I just, I want to put it off. I just want to come up with some little, do the laundry or do some dumb thing, go to the bank. But instead, I set my Pomodoro, I make myself work for 25 minutes, and usually I don't even need to do anything else. There's no more struggle anymore. I'm now, once I get started writing, I don't even want to stop. It's just coming really easily. You can see if that works for you. It's a free app. I get the $5 a month version so that I have a little more, features. I love it. Another thing is make big chunks of time where you block off categories of work. For me, I have people-facing tasks, chunks of time, and then I have chunks of time where there are no people, no notifications, no email, no meetings. People time has to be like isolated off, because if I have to do content creation, I need like big stretches, 5 hours, 8 hours of like no interruption, or I'll stop and do emails at little intervals. I try never to browse during the day. It's so hard. Part of my job involves the secret Facebook group for members. And the minute I go in there, all the other stuff that's on Facebook starts catching my eye. And I try to be really disciplined about that. You're watching this on YouTube. Well, every time I post on YouTube, I'm seeing all this like cool stuff coming up for some of my heroes, Richard Grannon and Russell Brand, and all these great videos are coming up, and I want to see what they're doing, but I got to get my work done first. So if I'm disciplined about anything, it's about protecting the chunks of time where I create and where I deal with people. And consuming content, I only do like after 9 o'clock at night. Okay, next thing is keep a somewhat tidy space around you at work. I don't know about your dysregulation and PTSD, but when I see clutter, it tends to be dysregulating. When my desk has everything kind of, more or less put away, kind of sort of perpendicular. I mean, I'm really not OCD about this. And in fact, because I work a lot and I have PTSD, I just generate mess everywhere I go. It's just like mess everywhere I go. But a couple times a day, I stop and I tidy up my workspace, because visually, that chaos and stuff just sort of laying all over the place, it registers to me like a great big to-do list, like screaming at me. And I need everything to like be in a folder or turned face down so it doesn't keep like calling my attention to it. I need to put my attention on one thing at a time, nice and slow. Now finally, no fairy video would be complete without this. I'm recommending you use my daily practice techniques, writing and meditating, special techniques, morning and evening, to calm and collect and clear up your mind. Now you might say, I don't have time for that. I can't put in a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour in the evening. And I totally understand that feeling. But trust me, these techniques will give back much more time than they consume. Because what is time? Time is the ability to pay attention and choose what you will do next. When you are throttled by stress, self-attack, dysregulation, you have no time. You can't really read, you can't really get something done, you can't really have a conversation. So you, with your calm mind, it's like your time just opens way up. You get so much more done. So that's my pep talk. Daily practice, link down below in the description section. It's in this video and just every video I do. Have a look for it. So Sue, hang in there. You are not alone, and with some tools and self-support, you can do this. And thank you for sending your letter to Ask the Fairy. If any of you watching would like to ask me a question, email me at hello@crappychildhoodfairy.com and put in the subject line, Ask the Fairy, so I know what it's about, and the staff forwards it to me. This topic is huge. How do you work and have a career and actually advance in your career even though you have PTSD symptoms from childhood? Past trauma can really block your ability to handle yourself and take the necessary actions that anyone needs to take if they're going to pursue a professional dream that involves staying productive and working with other people, which frankly can be hard for us. Because just about all jobs and all professional accomplishments involve that, productivity and connecting with people. So here are some major areas that I recommend you work on healing so that you can enjoy and advance in your career. All right, number one, you'll need to heal the tendency to wear the harshness of your past or of the present, like on your sleeve. Do you know that saying, like you just show it to the world? So you wouldn't want to be talking about the past all the time. You wouldn't want to be using it as your identity or bragging about it. Like, it was so bad for me, everybody. I know very well how this can be a problem because I grew up like welfare poor. And I had parents who were incredibly brilliant. My mom, my dad, my stepdad. The problems in the family, mostly stemming from alcoholism, actually, in some of the members, it absolutely crushed my parents' lives. They were all highly educated, but they were frustrated. We were poor most of the time, and there was a world of trouble and grief because of their struggle. And that's the background where I grew up. And like so many of you, I was determined that I would never be like them. I would be different. And in some ways I was. I didn't become an alcoholic, probably through no great virtue, but because of luck of the genetic draw. I was a great student. I was intelligent, but mostly I didn't have any supervision from parents. So when it was time to go to college, I had no idea how to go there. I walked into the admissions office at the University of Arizona in August of the year after I got out of high school, and I found out for the first time that you were supposed to apply and that you needed to take the SAT test. So that first semester, I went to community college and I cleaned houses to support myself. In the spring semester, I got into the U of A, but I had no idea how the whole thing worked or how I was supposed to support myself. And eventually I figured it out. I became a good student. And if that's all it took to have a good career, I would have been fine. But my problems went way beyond education. I had terrible self-esteem and I had trouble dealing with people. I was always in conflicts. Well, not always, but often in conflicts. And I'd make some new best friends and then the friendships would blow up. And this happened in my romantic life too, which really damaged the energy that I brought to work. And so these are some of the ways that people with trauma can wear their past on their sleeve. It just comes with you into the job. Another way that you could be wearing it on your sleeve, not that you mean to, but maybe you dress too shabbily. Maybe that the way you dress reflects low self-esteem or poverty consciousness. And it's not your fault that you grew up poor, and most people in the world are poor. But if you're trying to move up in the world, it's just really good advice that you would want to dress the part. And so putting energy into that, maybe you didn't learn it at home, but it's a good thing to do now. Another thing in that category of wearing your trauma on your sleeve is it's time to become mindful about how much you disclose to people about yourself, not just about your past and the trauma and, oh, I was abused. You don't necessarily want to bring that out very early in a friendship with somebody. But also self-disclosing about, what's going on at home right now, or how much traffic there was, or how sick you are, or what the symptoms were. Because I wasn't very consciously parented, my parents knew how to act with people, I think, but I was sort of feral, and I didn't know, and I would often go to work, and I would just be talking about problems and how much I resented people in the office, and I was just, I was sort of an open book, but not in a good way, and it stigmatized me. So another thing would be, you kind of almost brag about how bad things used to be in the past, just so that people will think that you're interesting or worthy, right? There's an element in our culture where we make victims into heroes only because they were victims. And it is heroic. It's a big deal to come up from a difficult past and to be working in a job. But it's appropriate to measure out how much you say about what that past is and not try to wear it like a badge of honor. All by itself. You still, just like everybody there, you kind of have to prove yourself. You have to learn skills, you have to get along with people, and you have to get things done. That's kind of what jobs generally expect, right? All right, so the second big area, a big trauma symptom area that you're going to need to heal to succeed at work is to deal with the tendency to underfunction. Now, some of us are overfunctioners and some are underfunctioners. And I'll tell you what exactly that is in a minute, but People who overfunction, who do too much, who like stay too late, or burn the midnight oil, burn themselves out, get really mad later that nobody reciprocated how much they're putting into a job or a relationship or something. With overfunctioning, there's often the big productivity crash that comes along, and you can't stay with it. So you set this expectation, hey, I can do everything, I'm heroic, and then you can't. Underfunctioning is sometimes the consequence of overfunctioning for a period of time, or for some people, it's just like their basic speed. So underfunctioning includes things like having a really hard time focusing for a long period of time, being restless at work, jumping on the internet, just can't really focus enough, being unreliable, not showing up on time for things where people were counting on you, or even worse, lying about the fact that you did it, or making up a fake story about why you didn't show up on time, or not even admitting that you there's like lying, and then there's pretending that it's not a problem, if you didn't show up for something where people were counting on you. Personally, that's my pet peeve. I don't like it when people lie or don't admit. Like, if they just say, I made a mistake, I'm like, all right, I make mistakes, I get it. But if they're just like, yeah, but it was because of, traffic or something, and I'm like, I drove here too, I know it's not traffic. Or they just don't even acknowledge, sorry, I'm late. Here's a little trick, by the way. When you come into a business meeting and you did have to be late, instead of coming in, it's very disruptive for the meeting. When you come in late to a meeting and people are already working, a person whose trauma is just hanging all over them comes in and goes, hey, I'm here. Oh my God, the traffic. Oh, I was trying to get here and I thought, and I was going to call, but I couldn't call. And that energy is really disruptive and calls a lot of attention to the fact that you're late. Here's what you can do when you're late. You come in very quietly, just don't let the door bang, be quiet, and come in and say, sorry, I'm late, and sit down, get out something to write on and start paying attention. You need not explain. If somebody asks you, maybe you can explain. Personally, I recommend experimenting with telling the truth about things. It holds you accountable for what's going on and allows you to make some positive changes in your life. All right, the third big symptom area of childhood PTSD that needs to be healed for you to succeed at work is a tendency to feel overwhelmed, like so overwhelmed that you can't even begin. You can't begin the work. Now, I get this. I get very overwhelmed. That's a PTSD thing I have. And I have a whole system. I have a morning routine that helps me start the day with a one foot in front of the other approach, rather than just a big, the day. I wake up like that. It's like an emotional flashback. My emotional flashbacks, that's a trauma thing. They're like this. I wake up and I'm like, it's been going on like in my dreams at night. I have dysregulation dreams even. And so I wake up sometimes in all this distress. It's like, I have so much to do. I have so much to do. And why is it me? Why is it me? I have to do everything. So that's an emotional flashback. When I start thinking that, if I don't stop it and start using my tools to come back and go, I don't have to do everything. I only have to do it one thing at a time. I can only do them, in a certain order. I'm going to make a list of what that order is and the best I can and start tackling it. To do that, I start with my morning routine, which always begins, I go get something to drink and I do my daily practice. And that's a specific writing technique followed by a specific meditation technique. Very simple, shockingly effective to help move that emotional flashbacky mind, those distressed hamster wheel thoughts of like, oh my God, I got to do so much. I got to do so much. That's the shape that my complex PTSD takes. And untreated, it just turns me into a nervous wreck who's angry, who's ineffective, who's isolated because the angry part is very offensive to other people. So instead, I make room in my mind for inspiration, creativity, ideas, and action by using these techniques. And if you ever want to learn those, they're always below all my videos. The daily practice, it's a free course. I think something like 500,000 people have taken it now, and that makes me so happy because it's really helpful. And the only way to find out if it helps you is to try it. So the overwhelm begins with, I get my mind in order with the racing thoughts and get the fearful and resentful thoughts out of my mind and onto paper. When I'm done with my daily practice, I take a shower, I go get my breakfast, and then I sit down and I work my to-do list. And I use an online tool for that. Lots of people have different ones. I use this thing called Kanban Flow, Kanban Flow. It's a free app, although I have a paid version. It's $5 a month or something. And It's a little structure where I can click and drag tasks into columns, and I color code them, and I plan each day of what I'm going to do. And I always put way too much in, and then at the end of the day, I can move them over into the next day or sort of rearrange the tasks ahead of me. And I love this tool. It's got a little timer built in, and it'll say, click the timer, it says, click on a task, and I go, oh, I'm going to prep the intros to 5 videos or something. So I put that and I time that, like 5 videos, that's like an hour and a half for me, right? If I already know what the letters are, I've picked the letters, but I'm going to prepare the introductions and sort of think through and what's the download I'm going to recommend at the end. I put some thought into that. Okay, hour and a half for me is this like green color. Half an hour is yellow. And 2 hours is blue. So I have the whole color system of how long something takes, and then I can sort of see my day. But I click on the task I'm going to do, and then I start a timer. And I've got my timer set at 25 minutes. It's called the Pomodoro method. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato, and legend has it the person who invented this technique was using a timer shaped like a tomato, Pomodoro. and I do that 25 minutes. So like sometimes I try to freelance it and just get productive all by myself without a timer. And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. I get very, I work on a computer, and also on my computer is this very interesting thing called the internet. And it's hard to resist going in there and go, oh, what's happening on YouTube today? How's the stats there? What are the comments? And Twitter and Facebook. Oh, somebody wants something. And next thing you know, I can't even remember what I intended to work on, literally. And you probably have the same thing. Like, I'm not being shocking here. I have that. I don't have ADHD. I'm very capable of focusing, but I need tools. And so setting a timer, it goes off after 25 minutes, and I shut down tabs, I shut down notifications for that period of time, and I just do that thing for 25 minutes. And it's really powerful if I can get started with a set of tasks that way. Being able to get things done is my superpower. I have so many like CPTSD traits that make it hard, but the reason I've been able to make a living in my life mostly, and certainly for the past 23 years, as a self-employed person, it's because I'm really good. I can see what needs to be done, and I can do it. And I used to do it for clients, and now I do it for Crappy Childhood Fairy. And I just have this very honed ability to go in and go, let's see, where are we? Where are we trying to get? What do we need to do? I have a big picture view of things. I'm good at that, analytical thinking. And people have different strengths, and that one's one of mine. So I can see what to do. And I used to be very helpful to my consulting clients, because I'd look at a project and then I would think through, here's where we need to be, here's what you need to do. And I would send them an email with this beautiful list of questions and action items. And that's like my dream, is that I have somebody like me who helps me do that now that I'm always like, out there leading Crappy Childhood Fairy. So staying organized, it's not natural to me because of my trauma, and I'm very good at it because of my ability to use tools. That's what I'm trying to get at. So that's overwhelm as something that keeps a person in underfunctioning. Another one is a tendency to favor doing grunt work for which you're gravely overqualified, rather than going for more challenging or higher paid roles, because you get so triggered that your CPTSD symptoms come out, that trying to stick your neck out or try something hard for you is too much. You can learn to bring that back down, but that's a sign that you're underfunctioning. If you're doing work where you're like, people don't even have any idea, like, I don't belong here, but we put ourselves there. We will often perceive ourselves as having no choice. But I'm making this video to try to talk to that part of you that knows that deep down inside there is a choice, and it might take some preparation and some courage and some work on healing your CPTSD symptoms so you can do it. But with more healing, you can take greater risks and put yourself out there and do the sort of job that you really can do, the one that gives you joy and that pays adequately. I want that for everybody. All right, another way that we underfunction is not asking for what we want. Do you do that? Where instead of saying, hey, you know what, I want to have a promotion, or I want to stop working in this part of the company and I want to work in that one, or I don't want to deal with this unpleasant person anymore. And we just think, oh, I have to put up with this. I can't, make a fuss because, again, I can't deal with how triggered I get around it. You might not even be consciously having that thought, but if you can't manage your CPTSD triggers and you get dysregulated and upset about things that set off your nervous system into CPTSD symptoms, you have to make your life small. Everything depends on learning to calm your triggers, not trying to make everybody else not trigger you. You can never really make that happen. But learning to calm your response to triggers until they're barely even triggers anymore. And then your life starts getting a lot bigger. That's underfunctioning. The thing about overfunctioning, the opposite, is like doing things for other people that they can do for themselves, trying to do more than your share, trying to prove yourself to the boss by like, look, I did 27 things for you instead of the one thing you asked. The problem with that is that if it's not rewarded, which it usually wouldn't be if it's not asked for, maybe, I don't know. But if it's not rewarded, it goes into resentment. The overfunctioning isn't like a genuine expression of yourself. It's a strategy to dance around and try to get somebody to like you and think you're good enough. So that's also like a CPTSD symptom to do that. We don't want to either overfunction or underfunction. There's a time for each, like in vacation, maybe you underfunction. When there's a big deadline, you overfunction, but you don't want to be a person who's stuck in one gear or the other, all right? The third area of CPTSD symptoms that can really get in the way of your career growth is getting dysregulated on the job. Now, you can learn to re-regulate, and it will make all the difference. And I can just, like, that has been my experience, and it was very quick that I began to change when I learned to identify that I was dysregulated, and I used my tools to re-regulate. And again, that's the daily practice course I teach. It's down in the description section. I recommend that you take this need to master re-regulation very seriously. If you get dysregulated, and by dysregulated, I mean a nervous system reaction to stress that people with trauma often get, which leads you to feel discombobulated, numb, emotionally kind of on a roller coaster, like your anger is too much, or your sadness is too much, or you're too excited about something. It's emotional dysregulation. If you get sick a lot of chronic diseases with no origin, that could be dysregulation. Inability to focus or learn, inability to read the room, like you walk in and you can't really tell what's going on with people. All of that can be dysregulation. And dysregulation has now turned out to be the core symptom that drives so many other trauma symptoms. So if you get dysregulated, you have everything to gain by learning to re-regulate and mastering it on the job and outside of the job. Dysregulation is the reason why you may be getting those productivity crashes where you get some sort of accomplishment, you put yourself out there, you get some accolades, and then, somebody says one little critical word and zoom, you go back down. Dysregulated people are really capable of accomplishing things, but they have a harder time sustaining just kind of a steady progress. There's these crashes of productivity. And if you have those, you may have been trying to hide them on the job, pretending you're sick, not really knowing what's wrong. Before I had healing for my complex PTSD, I would say when something really good happened, or I got recognized for something, a promotion, or, in my personal life, like somebody I really liked asked me out, something like that, I could have a productivity crash for 3 days easily. And to this day, if I get really, really upset about something, I can have another productivity crash. If I get dysregulated badly, it takes a certain amount of time to recover my re-regulation. So and this is after 29 years of having skills for this, you can think of how it used to be for me. I mean, I just went months where I could barely read a paragraph. I would read it over and over again. I was faking it. Once I was a passenger in a car and I had a cup of coffee, like a ceramic mug in my hand, and I can't remember what I was talking about with somebody, but what they said made me mad, and I just threw the cup out the window, and the cup smashed, and I remember they pulled the car over and they started crying. It was so upsetting to them. And I was so dysregulated that I didn't predict that would even affect them, that I smashed a cup out the window. It was just this weird, reckless, rough thing to do. And not coincidentally, it was something that my parents used to do, is like break dishes when they were upset. It was in there. So through my daily practice and through re-regulation, I've started to kind of let those old imprints of how to deal with feelings and lashing out like that it started to be rinsed off of me and washed downstream in the experience of my life. And then a new strength comes up inside where I have some balance and some calm inside to draw on when things are rough. And things get rough sometimes. Getting dysregulated at work can also cause you to sort of come off as hostile and intimidating and difficult. And Unfortunately, if you have CPTSD and it's active and you haven't yet developed a way to sort of do a self-examination and get some support from somebody who totally cares about you, like maybe a buddy in my daily practice program or a sponsor in 12 Steps, somebody you trust to sort of, when you can go, is it just me? Like, should I be really angry right now? It really helps to get a second opinion from trusted people, because if you're coming off as very, very difficult, even if people are obliged by law to treat you fairly, it's not fair to them that they would have to work with somebody who's causing so much anxiety. So I'm just going to ask you to look at it that way. It's very difficult to work with somebody who's leading with anger, who's leading with conflict, who's getting emotionally dysregulated on the job and sort of triggering and drawing off of the peaceful well that anybody else has managed to develop. The best way forward, if a job is really terrible and it makes you so angry all the time because it's a bad place for you to work, I encourage you to change jobs. Like, nobody's coming to save you on this. If you want to work in a better environment, it is time for you to start putting your ducks in a row so you can make that change. And if you're choosing to stay in the environment, you may need to assess as difficult things happen, wait a minute, am I being mistreated here? Should I just let it go? Should I just show up and be a good sport? Like, these are the improvisational decisions that we make day after day after day, especially when we're out in the world dealing with people. As you heal your dysregulation, you'll have good judgment about it. You'll have good judgment and you'll have equanimity, magnanimity. This is where you can be just sort of like kind and easygoing with people when they're edgy with you. And often you can be the one who sort of heads off a big conflict of just like, we're cool, okay. Not being a doormat. It's a fine line, isn't it? And this is where people with childhood PTSD can get so jammed up, is there is a conflict. Somebody's not being quite right. They're off in some way. You need to set a boundary. You want to be kind about it. You don't want to be a doormat. And this is where we get very confused. So again, I recommend daily practice to help move the stress thoughts downstream so you can have clear thoughts and lucid decisions about like what to do about the little things that happen every day. And you will be surprised how quickly your life goes from a trajectory that's kind of not going that well to a trajectory that is going so much better because of these little decisions along the way. The little decisions where you kind of handle it. You handle it. You're the reliable person. You're the sturdy person. You're the person with boundaries who says no to mistreatment without a big bunch of fireworks about it. It's just a boundary. I remember I used to run a video production company, and I meditate every day, twice a day. And one of those meditations is somewhere around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And when you do video production, sometimes you can't, the schedule demands that you keep working quite long into the evening. But I knew, and I had the privilege because I owned the company of just like, I need to meditate or I'm going to start getting grumpy, unfocused, hostile, intimidating, all those things. And I know that I do that in it, and it brings me back into, lucidity and kind of a goodness of heart and a clear mind. And that's exactly how I want to be doing all my work always. And so I would just be like, about 5 o'clock, I'm going to have us all take a break. I'm going to go meditate. And I set a boundary on that. And people were just like, okay, Anna has to meditate. And I had spent years missing my evening meditation when I was working because I was afraid that I couldn't ask for it or I couldn't try it. And so I just put that out there. You may not own your company right now or have that privilege, but you may be surprised that when you set boundaries in a way that's not trying to put any responsibility on other people, but just like going, I have this thing I need to do. It's now 9 in the morning, and when it gets to be that time, I'm going to need a break to do that. So are we good? Are we good? And then maybe you need to be a little flexible about it, but you get to do the things that help you stay in the frame of mind where you can advance in your career and not just, that's because I'll tell you at 5 o'clock, if I'm not writing and meditating and the stress of video production, if I didn't do it, I turned into the kind of person who did not get another job from the client. I'll say that. So it became totally important that I care for myself. Anyway, it surprised me. People were very glad for me to take care of myself. And not only did they tolerate it, but they respected me for it. They started asking me, so how do you meditate? Where did you learn to do that? Like, it became intriguing to them that somebody took care of themselves right in front of them. All right, a sub area again of dysregulation on the job is it makes it very hard to deal with criticism, and there's just no way around it. Like if you're going to grow on the job, you have to be open to some level of people telling you how you maybe made a mistake or how you need to do it better. It can also make you vague about discussions of money. It's easy to walk into a job and go, so yeah, I'd like to do the job, and then be like, oh, I should have asked for how much money. I just have no idea. And if you are not somebody who can be comfortable talking about money and own what it is you require, then you are very unlikely to get what you want or deserve. And so dysregulation makes that sort of decision to be able to be honest about what it is you're looking for, and not playing any games, but just saying, I need to be paid this much, or this job isn't going to work for me. To be able to do that with peace in your heart is what re-regulation looks like. And not to be like, oh, I'm preemptively so angry, I never get what I want, oh, here we go. Oh no, I can't say anything, it's going to come out wrong, it's stupid, fine, I'll just not say anything. You don't want to be that person. The other thing that you can get very vague about that can really create problems on the job, and dysregulation, this is a big way that dysregulation sabotages people, is you get vague about sexual boundaries. So if you are getting sexually harassed, or let's say that a coworker and you have an attraction going, and you're hanging out after work and you don't really know, like, is this a date? Is this an attraction? Is this okay at work? Are we going to talk about this? All that stuff. To get vague about it at work is so shooting yourself in the foot. Work is a place where you need to be very, very clear about where you're coming from, and you need to be clear where other people are coming from. And I know that it is a tricky dance to be able to clarify these things, that you could really put people on the spot, you could make them feel threatened. Maybe you're not ready to do that yet. But I urge you, do not get vague about your boundaries, about sex, attraction, hanging out with people who you think maybe are hitting on you. That is some place to say, and this is where being re-regulated helps. You can just say, oh, thanks, this feels like a date. I wouldn't want to do that. You can say it in the nicest way so that if there's any hope that you can set your boundary without the other person freaking out, which is what bad people do, right? When they're confronted with boundaries. It happens at work, obviously. But if you possibly can, you set your boundaries in the nicest possible way so that you're not part of any conflict. And most people will say, oh, yeah, that's not where I was coming from, and the whole thing evaporates. Even in your personal life, if you have vague and confusing relationships with people where you're like, is this a date, or is this are we flirting? Are you cheating on your spouse? Like, what's going on here? Where you don't know, there's a magic power that you always have with you, and it's honesty. When there's like magic pixie dust all over everything, like, I don't know, we're just not going to say anything about what's really going on here because it will ruin the moment, or I'll feel embarrassed, or then you'll know, or it'll become obvious that this is not sustainable. Like, those are things that we do when we have trauma wounds. This is also what people do in limerence, is keep it vague, because to have it be concrete would be to have it be something that you must say no to. It's not real. It's not legitimate. You will get rejected. So we keep it vague, and we get too good at that. But that is the kind of thing that will bite you in the butt at work. You do not want to be vague about these things. The ideal scenario, though, is where you hold your boundaries at work. You don't get too into it with people. If you have to explain yourself, you're already losing your boundary. If you have to, you can go to your support people outside of work to process the emotions and have a cry and deal with all the feelings that come up around it. The fourth trauma zone that can come and hold back your advancement at work is the other people in your life. Usually it would be a partner who are just messed up enough to sabotage the impression you make at work. And that could be everything from the controlling and abusive partner at home. It could be people who continue to have drama in their own life, and you get calls all the time and you have to take them to the emergency room. Or you have a home life that you invest a lot of energy into hiding from people at work, and that may be appropriate, but when it's draining your energy all the time of what's going on at home, maybe you have a partner with an addiction, maybe you have a marriage that's falling apart, maybe you have a kid who's in great difficulty, and I know how complicated those situations can be, but I would be leaving something big out if I didn't acknowledge that having troubled people in your home life can sabotage you at work. So I hope you can do everything you need to do to have a little bit of separation from that. Coming to work with what I call an emotional hangover. You know, I never was much of a drinker, but I would get into such emotional scrapes and difficulties with people that I would come to work late with a terrible migraine, looking awful, having cried all night, eyes all puffy. And it was functionally, I had to admit, like being an alcoholic with a hangover. And it used to happen too much because of the kinds of relationships that I had before I had trauma healing and when I still didn't know how to get re-regulated. It's just such a relief now in post-healing life. I talk about it like it's all done. I mean, so much progress. Luckily, it continues, so I don't even know where it's going next. But I wake up in the morning every day, okay. And it's a great asset to being able to open up my heart and my life to new opportunities and things that are hard for me. Like everything that I've ever done as Crappy Childhood Fairy, at some point it was new, like putting my first video up on YouTube. It took so much courage. And I'm working on a book now and I have an agent, and trying to do all of that is it takes courage. I could never do it if I had an emotional hangover as often as I used to. So that's another reason. Like so many people with complex PTSD, my early career looked a lot like a roller coaster with great accomplishments and then big descents, giving up, quitting things, crashing and burning. And it wasn't just productivity, but it had a lot to do with people who I chose as partners. And twice I ended up with men who had active, serious drug addictions. In both cases, I didn't realize it at first. And one of them had a relapse after a couple years into the relationship. One of them had been secretly using the whole time. And it was absolutely devastating to my career both times. Both times, my career derailed. It was very stigmatizing to me. There was no way I could continue to hide it. We're talking serious drugs and terrible consequences of what happened to them. When I started to have boundaries about who got into my life, which involved making a decision that it was okay with me if I was single forever, a single mom at that point, I would be single forever, but I would never again have that level of drama of an active addict in my life. My career couldn't help but go up because I stopped having this crazy, intense drama going on all the time. And so if you've never had a drama-free life and been able to go to work like that with your own optimism or energy, or maybe you don't like the job that day, but just to basically have your wits and your emotions in their little cubby holes when you arrive at work, you're going to be so pleasantly surprised how much energy and bandwidth you have that's all for you to be able to accomplish what you want. It's fantastic. That is one of the gifts of healing. All right, a fifth way, trauma area that will stop you from getting ahead at work is choosing jobs and bosses who match your terrible family of origin, right? How many times have you done that? Like constantly. Brings out the worst in you when you do that. Like you may be able to get a lot of healing with your parent, but there's a reason why we get some distance from those toxic dynamics. And if you're not healed yet, you will have a tendency to choose bosses and coworkers and work environments that have some sort of like mimicking yuckiness about them, like what you grew up with. So for me, I would say the bosses, I've had some good bosses. I haven't had a boss in like 23 years, but I had clients. And one of the hardest things that I kept getting into was clients or bosses with significant drinking problems, like my mom, drugs and alcohol problems. And I get around that energy and it's like kryptonite, where I feel very angry, I feel shut down, I feel very snippy. I'm not pleasant and I'm not very visionary. And it ends up using up about 60% of my vital force, just to cope with somebody who's high. And it's not good for me. I don't want to be around it. It's just one of those things I had to make a conscious decision. I will not work with people who I feel are drunk or high. And so many bad memories there. The other negative tendency that I would tend to gravitate towards is bosses who really underestimated me. Now, being a consultant is nice. When you're freelancing, they think highly enough of you to employ you, and it may not last forever. You may not get a second job with them. But if it's spread out a little bit, you get to really work on your professional skills without falling into a parent-child relationship with your boss. And I think there's a subtle way of doing that. I get letters from people, or I've coached people where they're like, My boss invalidates me, my boss plays favorites, and I'm just like, oh, bad situation, bad situation. Sometimes I think the only thing for it is to get out of a job like that. Sometimes healing is possible, but if you're dealing with a dynamic that you grew up with, and you're not very far along your path of healing your trauma symptoms, being around the stuff that hurt you in the first place can just really take you down. So I recommend making a conscious decision about the kind of boss and coworkers that would be good for you and seeking it out and being willing to take the time to find that. And look, I started in this video telling you I had to clean houses while I was young, just to get by. I've had all kinds of jobs that were hard and that I just had to do for money. And I know it's like that, but we're all hoping for something a little better, right? We want to get on to where we feel fulfilled, where we're using our talents and gifts, where we're getting paid well enough to be financially okay. That's a very nice thing to have. It feels good to do the absolute best job you can do. And one thing that comes as a shock to people is that when you're in a job and you work for a boss or a company or a project, your job is to make that entity, that person, that organization, that group as successful as you can. So when you're in a parent dynamic with the parent who hurt you, your objective becomes something very different than, making them successful. And that may sound very self-sacrificing to you. It's not. When you make your boss successful, you rise up. If your boss doesn't recognize that that's valuable and reward you, either it's not a place that has a better place for you, or it's not a place that's willing to give that to you, and that's not a good environment. So if I had my whole career to do over again, and what I tell my coaching clients is, be brave about envisioning a step forward, a step up, a step out. And if you can't get it from where you are right now, then you have to do the very triggering and dysregulating act of finding something new and quitting the old job. But you can now do that without a big conflict or fireworks or rancor, that it's just a positive step that people take, and it's okay, and you deserve it. And when you learn to master re-regulation from your dysregulation, it becomes natural. Be sure you surround yourself with people who get it, that you have people with whom you can be honest. At first I had this in 12-step programs. Then I started to have it around people who had complex PTSD. And that's one thing I love about our membership program is everybody's working on this stuff. Everybody's kind of working off the same playbook about how to do it. Everybody's hopping on Zoom together. Our members create their own Zoom calls to do the daily practice together. They have buddy relationships. Anyway, I was turning into an ad for that. But if you really wanted to be around people who are walking this path of improving their lives, come check it out. There's a link always down below in the description section for my membership program or on my website. So with that, I wish you well. I wish you every bit of freedom from the oppression and suppression of the past, what people did to you, and the ways that you've held yourself back since then too, so that the best in you, so that everything you're capable of can come forward and shine. It's not just because that's what will make you happy. It's because we need you. The world depends on all of us becoming our full and real selves and to be able to bring our best to everything we do. It's wonderful to get a lot done in your life, but overfunctioning is a trauma reaction where a person does too much work, too much managing, too much trying to compensate for other people being unsafe or unloving and unreliable. Overfunctioning is a survival mechanism that can be destructive to your health, your relationships, and people end up resenting overfunctioners, especially underfunctioners. They do not like it, although they may depend on it. Not having 100 things to do can make an overfunctioner feel anxious. So no matter how much you swear you're going to slow down, you often won't. But is it really so bad to work harder than most other people? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Carrie, and she writes, "Hey, Fairy, I wanted to get your thoughts on compulsion habits as it relates to being busy. I've done quite a bit of work on myself thanks to my crappy childhood, but one area where I feel like I still have a lot of room to grow is relating to how I deal with my schedule and my time. I've set up my life in such a way that I have a great amount of satisfaction and meaning in my work." I'm going to circle this. I'll come back through after reading all the way through. It's kind of a short one. But I have up to 5 different jobs or projects at any given time. I get it. A cycle I can't seem to get myself out of, despite how much consciousness and intention I bring to this. I'm at the point where I really think I have some kind of a deep block. I'm tired of this constant cycle of too many deadlines and intense time-pressured work. Even if I could even get rid of one project, my life would feel lighter, but deciding between projects feels like Sophie's choice. My schedule starts early in the morning and goes through dinner, then a break, followed frequently by a little more work. I actually don't consider myself a workaholic, ironically. I just think I'm somewhat addicted to hedging my bets and not saying no to what could be great opportunities. I know this isn't sustainable, but I don't know how to get out of it. And I wonder how much of this relates to my crappy childhood. I seem to be very good at hedging my bets. Thank you so much for any insight you can provide, Carrie. Oh, Carrie, I relate to you so much. I get it about hedging bets. I get it about having multiple projects going on. Now, I may be projecting, but one reason I love having multiple projects is, first of all, I need variety. And a second reason is because I need to feel like something new is happening. I know that a lot of projects I work on, especially, I don't know, I work for myself. It sounds like you do too. And some of the projects that I pursue end up fizzling. Some of them end up being wildly successful. Some of them are just a big hard slog and have to be abandoned at some point. Some of them are a big hard slog and they go well eventually. And figuring that out takes time. I thrive on the energy that I get from like the excitement of it all. Is this going to fly? If I hustle a little bit, could I make this go? Should I make this? Like I'm dreaming about a couple new courses to make in the fall. And every day I have to put them on my to-do list as a thing I can't do right now because I'm writing a book right now. But I just want to. I want to do it. But of course, I can't do everything at the same time. So I understand that pushing yourself. So I also understand you saying that you think you have a deep block. And so the question for you is, against what? What is it that you're avoiding? What is it that you're avoiding? And I think you're going to need some quiet time to reflect on this question. So let me just talk about some stuff you said. You're tired of the constant cycle of too many deadlines and intense time-pressured work. So that stress, that is often a sign that we're avoiding something. Sometimes I have feared having big empty spaces in my life of space, no partner, lots of time, because I finally named it. I called it the pack of wolves would come and get me. It felt like something was chasing me. And so I used my daily practice technique. A lot of people here do that. If you haven't learned it yet, it's always down in the description section. And it's a set of techniques for calming dysregulation, and also it allows how you really feel to gradually surface in a gentle way that you can handle and see. And it also, there's a whole bunch of like fake ideals and fears and resentments and stuff cluttering up how you really feel about things. And it's a way that gets processed out of the way. So the truth of how you feel is there just glowing, from time to time, because you keep doing this work of rinsing off the crud of your mind. So it sounds like you have a lot of competing interpretations of this. It's actually great, it's good, it's bad, you don't like the pressure. And if you could get rid of one project, life would feel lighter. So it sounds like unconsciously you make a choice to keep it at this pitch. It's a certain pitch. Like, I know you sound like me. You could turn it up a notch and make it even harder on yourself, but something in you goes, no, that's too much. You could turn it down, but that's too little. There's something about the current energy of the whole thing that's working for you for whatever your goal is. So I first will introduce the possibility that there's nothing wrong, that this is just what you do. This is how you're wired. This is who you are, and there's nothing wrong. That's a possibility. Your schedule starts early in the morning, goes through dinner, then a break, then a little more work. And you don't consider yourself a workaholic, whatever that is, who knows. But you think you're somewhat addicted to hedging your bets. So that's what you've identified so far, is that you want to make sure something in the pipeline is going to come through and yield money, I presume, money, security, that you always have to keep going. I was talking in a recent video about how early in adulthood I used to buy too much food and my cupboards just had too much in there. I'd been hungry as a kid. So, having enough money and security and options, they're like doors, when you live in a cage, like an option is a door. Having money means you can leave the cage. I grew up poor. I was poor as a young adult. And I gotta say, it's awesome to have enough money that you're never stuck, that you could always do something else if you needed to. And it's a wonderful freedom. And I want that for everybody with CPTSD, is to get to that point where you have enough that you are free and you never have to stay in a bad situation or a bad job or an abusive relationship for money. So you like to get the new opportunities, and you say, I know it isn't sustainable, isn't it? I don't know. I didn't really hear why it's not sustainable. Could you do it? Do you have a partner? Are they unhappy with it? Is it going to ruin your relationship? I don't know. Is it ruining your health? You didn't say any of that, but you don't know how to get out of it. And so you wonder how much it goes back to your crappy childhood. Yeah, it sounds like it could. You're very good at hedging your bets. So it sounds like you need a sense of security. It sounds like you need a sense of security to feel like you have choices about how much you work. And a lot of what's missing from your security, like you might have perfect security, but the anxiety about it is still like pushing you. So I'm going to really just invite you, try this daily practice and see what happens. There you'll be writing whatever's troubling your mind in the anxiety category and the anger category, whatever's troubling your mind, the little things, the big things, and you ask for them to be removed, and then you rest in meditation and let your mind recompose itself. And for people watching, what I've just described to you is the barest of outlines. Take the free course. There's a hour of instruction and then 25 FAQ videos. There are thousands of people using this technique. And if you learn them, you will be invited to come to free Zoom calls live with me. I do them every 2 weeks, and they're wonderful. We get together, we use the techniques together, and then I take questions. I'm very, very invested in anyone who wants to try this to learn how to do it properly and get free the way I did. It's very freeing to be able to release these thoughts in such a practical way that costs nothing. All you need is paper and a pen, right? And then things just get a little truer. That's what happens. People go, will this happen? Will that happen? I don't know. Things will get a little truer. Something that's bad might fall apart. Something that's good might get stronger. Something that burdens you might just disappear. Something that burdens you might come into focus as an action you need to take. There's no exact outcome that's predicted by this. It's just that things get truer and they settle down. There's not so much nervous system dysregulation, running the show for you. So I hope you try it. I hope you'll get back to me someday and just tell me how it goes and what you find about it. Personally, I'm somebody, I kind of match what you're saying. I work a lot. I complain about it sometimes, but I love my mission. And I think I have the same hedging bets thing underneath that. But nowadays, I love my mission so much. And I just have a sense of finite time to, share, to develop this whole program of healing on childhood PTSD. And I want to get it out to the world, to as many people as possible in whatever time I have left on earth. And I'm able-bodied and cognitively aware enough to do it. I love what I'm doing. And my life is sort of falling into place around it. So that's a possibility for you, Carrie. I hope you get the truth from this.